Da-da-da-da! I'm getting into the territory where some viewers might be like, Leandra, what are you doing? Oh boy, this one makes me nervous to share. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Leandra the TBR0, and my goal is to lessen my physical TBR one book at a time. For those of you who've been around for quite some time, you may have remembered that I did an entire video dedicated to counting my physical TBR, and I had over 400 books, which is way too many, at least for me, for my personal lifestyle, for the space that I have, and that was pretty intimidating. So today, however many months later, I've officially decided to post my first book unhaul. Yes, it's a big day, and I have quite a few books that I am unhauling. Some of them are ones that I already plan on taking off my shelves, and they're on PangoBooks right now. They've been on there for a few months, whereas others, I hopefully will be having them up in the next couple days, just so that they can go off in the world, maybe have a second chance to a forever home with a different book lover. Maybe they can be a 5-star read for someone else. So yeah, that's the goal here today. I'm going to be kind of cleansing my shelves, feeling the weight lift from my shoulders, and I'm really excited about it. I will let you all know that I have already pulled the books that I plan on unhauling, mainly because I was recording myself do it, and I was looking back on that footage and I was like, no one needs to see me all hot and bothered as I'm like perusing my shelves, drenched in sweat, trying to figure out reasons for why I'm unhauling a book. Whereas now I'm more calm and I'm feeling really good about the choices I've decided on. And so I'm just going to casually let you know the books that I've decided to unhaul. Some of them I've read, some of them I haven't, and I recognize that the ones I haven't read might be your favorites at home. And I am so sorry that they've decided to not make the cut, or I've decided that they haven't made the cut, but honestly, for various reasons, I've realized that they aren't going to work for me. Maybe I've changed as a reader. Maybe I bought them during my days as someone who used to be a binge buyer, so I would buy so many books at one time just because I wanted to have books, to own them, before I realized how amazing the resources at the library were, before I started working at a library. And honestly, no harm in ridding books from your shelves that you realize aren't going to be giving you joy, even if you haven't started them yet. And again, giving them a chance elsewhere for a really reasonable price, I think that works out really well. Also, a few of these I'll be donating to my library for a second leaf in case someone else in my community doesn't have the money, the means to buy books, but they really enjoy the idea of owning books as well. This is also an option for my community, at least. So on that note, let's get unhauling. I've tried to organize them by category. That might not have worked. We'll see how it goes. First and foremost, let me unhaul my mysteries and thrillers. So the first book I'm unhauling is The Girl Before by J.P. Delaney. This one, if I ever do want to read it, I know that the library I work at has a copy. I haven't heard very good things, and I think it leans more thriller than mystery, and I've realized that thrillers do not vibe with me. I will read them occasionally on audiobook. There have been a few thrillers that I've enjoyed, but the idea of giving a thriller 5 stars is something so far out of what I ever do. I know that there's not really a point of me keeping it, especially because the ratings for this one are particularly low. So away it goes. I am also going to be unhauling Hungry Ghosts by Kevin Jared Hussein. This is a Caribbean author. I actually recall buying this when I was celebrating finishing my master's. I decided to surprise myself with a few books that I had never heard of before. I really wanted to go out, celebrate at a bookstore, and buy a couple books that were completely new to me, mainly because when I'm buying books these days, more often than not, they are books I've already read, and I love them so much I want to own them. And I really didn't want to fall into that. I wanted to actually gift myself with new books when I graduated. And I did start this back when I was doing Get a Clue Readathon, and there was a very explicit animal death on the page that I actually had to stop immediately because of how much it affected me, and I will not be continuing it. So I did DNF this one, and off the shelf it goes. Next, I'm unhauling The Busybody by Kemper Donovan. This one was an ARC that was sent to me, and I ended up giving it 2 stars. It really was an okay mystery, but there was some fat phobia in it, as well as objectification of men to the point where it's really frustrating that we need to provide equality and realize that objectification of anyone is not okay. So yeah, 2 stars. I'm not going to be keeping it. I'm also not going to be selling it. This one I'm just going to put on my free shelves at the library, and someone can take it if they want. But it's really tough when you see problematic things in books, and I'm like, I also feel badly throwing it away. So that's my solution. I am unhauling all of my Leanne Moriartys, and by all, I only own 2. I own Big Little Lies, and there's also 9 Perfect Strangers on here. I remember I gave Big Little Lies 5 stars when I read it, but I just don't think I'm ever going to read it again, and I feel as though she's a bit too mainstream as far as like modern mysteries go. And the last one I did read was Truly Madly Guilty, and I really didn't like that one. I wasn't that impressed, and so I haven't felt the need to pick her up again. And because I'm not going to ever reread these, someone else can enjoy them better than I can, having them just collect dust on my have-read shelves. Oh boy, this one makes me nervous to share. I am unhauling The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Turton, because I gave it 1 star. I found this to be really problematic. It also had fat phobia in it, and there was a character or a body in which this person inhabits who was an assaulter. He participated in essay. People did not feel the need to really do anything about it within this world, and it really made me uncomfortable to have our main character be in his body and feeling his urges. And there was just so many other things wrong with this book. So because it's got 1 star, obviously I don't want to keep it, so away it goes. Death Under a Little Sky. This one was sent to me by a publisher for a promotional event, and I ended up DNFing it at about 200 pages. I just felt like I was forcing myself to keep going. It was going to end up being maybe a 3 star or lower, and so I decided not to keep going with it. So I'm unhauling this as a DNF, and hopefully someone else really appreciates it, because I could see potential. It just wasn't for me. And finally, in my mystery thriller category, we have Long Bright River by Liz Moore. I listened to the audiobook for this one, and I remember really enjoying it. This is a book that's been on my shelves for years because I haven't been participating in Book of the Month for years. And I did really appreciate it. I think I ended up giving it 3 or 4 stars. It was a fun audiobook, but like I said, I'm just not going to reread it. And because it wasn't a 5 star, like most thrillers for me, there's no point in me keeping it. And I know that it is a well-loved title, so why not, again, give someone else a chance to adore it and decide to keep it. Next is nonfiction, because it was the closest pile to me. I am unhauling all of my David Sedaris books. I remember I was binging David Sedaris for quite some time. He's a nonfiction writer, typically writes short stories and then has a collection of them published every once in a while. I'm unhauling Calypso, the first one I ever read by him, Naked, as well as Dress Your Family in Corduroy and Denim. So I'm unhauling all 3 of these, and they are very humorous, and I do still enjoy him, but I don't gravitate towards nonfiction, and to even really keep nonfiction on my shelves that I've read is a super rare occurrence. I think I only have like 4 or 5 at this point, so yeah, I might as well just give them away. Why not? Tuesdays with Morrie. This one is also like a well-loved kind of modern classic for nonfiction. I know that this author typically writes fiction now, and he's also known as being a sports writer. I remember I read this back when I was trying to get back into reading, and I found it really provoking. I cried, blah, 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 but I'm not going to reread it, and he's an author that I really don't gravitate towards anymore, and I don't know, might as well give it away. A Walk in the Woods by Bill Bryson. This is pretty much a modern classic for nature writing, for environmentalist writing, conservation, and I did find it really thought-provoking. It seems like it's really important for that canon of nonfiction, something that I really love if I read nonfiction, tends to be nature writing, but it wasn't as impressive as I thought it was going to be. There were some moments of humor, some anecdotes I found really thought-provoking, scary as well, but I also didn't like Bill Bryson and his hiking partner's views on women at times. That did really frustrate me, and there really was some like anti-feminist or just like insulting depictions. So that's why I ended up getting like a 3 star for me, because I can appreciate how important it is to advocate for the Appalachian Trail, but also, guys, what are we doing? So I'm unhauling it. I'm also unhauling Civilization and Its Discontents. This was a book I had to read during my master's program, and I'm obviously never going to read it again. I actually hate Sigmund Freud. He is a scholar that I always used to get frustrated with reading, and one of my professors during my master's would laugh every time we had to do this, or if he recommended that I cite Freud in my research, because this guy and I just don't get along. But yeah, we'll see if someone actually wants it. This is my fantasy category, we'll say. I have Black Leopard, Red Wolf. I've just heard that there's a lot of content warnings in here that don't vibe with me, and it's also a very chunky book. Back when I used to think that I could convince myself to be a chunky reader, I still read those books once in a while, like a friend's recommendation, but from what I've heard, I know it's not going to be a book for me, so why am I reading it to then potentially give a low rating to a BIPOC author, especially one that is really well loved by the right people who are reading it? So I know I'm going to end up DNFing it because it's going to like really impact me, the kind of violence in here. So yeah, I'm going to give it to someone else who might be able to appreciate it more than me. Oh, these next two are disappointing. So I am going to be unhauling Kill the Farm Boy, as well as No Country for Old Gnomes. Yes, they have amazing titles. They are very fun. And apparently it's a bit of a retelling, reimagining in a satirical sense to The Princess Bride. I have seen the movie. I read the book back when I was a child, but I haven't read it since. It's on my shelves. I'm actually counting it as have not read. So it's on my TBR shelves because I read it in school and I don't really count it. But I ended up DNFing Kill the Farm Boy. It was meant to be a buddy read with Brittany back in December, and both of us were like, no, this isn't for us. And I'm really sad because I bought the sequel thinking I was going to love both, because I've also appreciated Delilah S. Dawson's writing before on her own, but this was really weird and it was kind of like fart humor, and that's just, I don't know, that's not for me. My final fantasy book that I'm unhauling is Inkblood Sister Scribe by Emma Torres. This is another book that actually was gifted to me by the publisher, and I only read it for my Meet the Booktuber Brittany Loves Reading edition. She recommended it to me mainly because she knew that it was on my shelves, or at least I asked her if I could read it because it was already on my shelves. And I did enjoy it. I found it really interesting. I think I gave it 3.75 stars. I would definitely try this author again, but it's not one that I would ever reread. So again, why am I keeping it on my shelves, even though it is really pretty? I understand why people would keep it just because it's pretty. My tiny sci-fi stack. I am gonna unhaul The Moon Represents My Heart. This was also sent to me by the publisher, and I was so excited about it. I tend to really like time travel, especially, I think I was coming off of reading Sea of Tranquility, one of my favorite books of all time, but that's also one of my favorite authors of all time, Emily St. John Mandel. And so I wanted to give this author a try because it was her debut and it seemed really interesting, but it was really slow. It was kind of boring. And on top of that, I really hated the dynamic between the men and women. It was very traditional and submissive as far as the women kind of being subservient to the men, and no one really caring that most of the men in this book were cheating on the women. I was like, what are we doing here? So yeah, I didn't really appreciate this, and why am I keeping it on my shelves, even though it's also very pretty? I believe this book is on my shelf destruct list for 2024. I already forgot what books I chose for that video, but I am unhauling The Philosopher's Flight. This was also obviously a BOTM book back when I subscribed to them however many years ago, and I'm not gonna read it. The concept doesn't seem that interesting to me, and so why keep it on my shelves? This one kind of pains me to get rid of. It's by George Saunders, In Persuasion Nation. The reason why is because it was a gift from a good friend of mine. She read it, she really loved it. She gave me her copy, and I did enjoy it. I thought it was really thought-provoking. It's more literary sci-fi, as George Saunders kind of tends to be, but I know I'm not going to reread it, especially as a short story collection. A lot of these that are in my have read pile that are short stories, it's because I just know I'm not going to go back. I'm not going to go back and read short stories. That's just not the kind of reader I am right now. So I might as well give it away, give more room to possibly new favorites in the next coming months or years. My spooky horror supernatural reads? Why not? This is going to be hard because this is not a book I have tried, but I also think the content warnings, now that I know about them, it's going to make it a book that's not for me. The only good Indians, I've never actually read anything by Stephen Graham Jones, so maybe I can try a different book by him, but this was something I bought kind of impromptu, spontaneously when I wanted to get more into horror, so I just kind of grabbed this and a few other things. I think a couple of them in this pile actually. And now I know what kind of horror I like. I've heard that there's explicit animal death, possibly animal, like violence towards animals. I don't really know. So my library has it. So I'll read the library copy if I really want to, but I can't imagine it's going to be a favorite. So might as well get rid of it. I'm getting into the territory where some viewers might be like, Leandra, what are you doing? I am unhauling A Dowry of Blood, and I know this is the original copy and a lot of people probably really want this on their shelves, but for me, I gave it 4 stars. I really appreciated it. I thought it was a really fascinating retelling or reimagining on the original Dracula story from the perspective of someone in his harem, but I didn't adore it. It's not a book that I would read again, mainly because it was very gothic classic, which it was meant to be. It was meant to, you know, mirror that language and that style. But because that's not something that I tend to like in my horror, I just, again, because this is such a well-loved and coveted cover, if not story in general, I might as well let another reader be able to cherish it more than me, because I'm not going to appreciate it as much. I think I've been getting closer and closer to the camera, so I'm going to back up. I ended up DNFing Stranger Things Happen. I read the first story, and I think I might have been in the second. Wait, did I DNF it in the first story? There was just references to incest, and I was like, no, I'm good. It's a short story collection. I know that that's going to be one story, and probably not all stories are going to have problematic content, but it really weirded me out, and I'm kind of disappointed because I really liked Kelly Link's, what's it called, Pretty Monsters. That was a really fun collection, but this one, no, I'm unhauling it. Another great cover too, it's too bad. Stephen King's Skeleton Crew. Again, back when I was trying to get into horror, I remember I read Stephen King's The Stand. I really liked it, but I don't know. That's also a book I've unhauled, so I don't even own that anymore. Then I read The Gunslinger. I wasn't impressed with that, and I really haven't picked up any Stephen King since, just because some of the content in his books I have an issue with, or I don't read chunky books, so why did I buy a chunky collection of his short stories? I have no idea. Past Leandra, you and I are going to have a sit down and talk, because who were you? Who was I? Anywho, I know I'm not going to ever read this, so I might as well unhaul it. These two are more in spooky category. They aren't really horror in my opinion, but I just didn't really know where to label or categorize them. The Removed by Brandon Hobson. I found this really thoughtful. I gave it 4 stars. I remember I really liked it. I liked the kind of perspective of purgatory, but from an Indigenous author's perspective. So I can definitely recommend it if you're interested. But again, it's not one that I'm probably ever going to reread. So I might as well give it away to someone else who will love it more than me. And finally, for this category, Bunny by Mona Awad. I read this as a buddy read with a friend, and I remember I really had a good time discussing it with her, but I also think both of us gave it 3 stars. It kind of read YA for me, which is hard because it is set in a college, and I think college settings, you know, new adult settings, do kind of sway either too YA or too adult at times, because that's a weird time in all of our lives. I think that the college setting is really difficult to put on the page, and it's really well done when it's well done. So I know that there's a cult following for this, and I do like the fact that the author is taking this from the perspective of her own background, how she's kind of pushing down her own experience, kind of criticizing the university that she attended for her own MFA. So that was really fun to see the kind of nest egg? Easter egg references, but it's not going to be one I read again. So romances, and yes, I have 4 of them. Also, yes, I haven't read any of them, but I just know they're not going to be for me. Christmas in Blue Dog Valley. This was sent to me as a promotional, you know, kind of tour situation, and I did post about it saying I was excited, and I was at the time, but I know that I'm not going to be into it, especially right now. I am not in a romance era. I think I'm actually in a romance revolt. Please send help, and please send some examples in the comments of romances that you can recommend to get me out of it, because it's happening again. Every romance I pick up is making me more and more averse to the genre, which is really upsetting. So there we are. Meet Me in Paradise by Libby Hubsher. Also, If You Ask Me by Libby Hubsher. I've just heard that they're actually kind of more literary, or not depressing, but they discuss certain heavy hitting topics. And I've also heard that be described as Emily Henry, and the one and only Emily Henry book I read was also a 1 star. So I don't know, it's making me nervous to keep it on my shelves. As well as China Rich Girlfriend. I read the first book in this series. I also don't even think I own that anymore, so why do I have this one? I don't know, but I remember I found it a very fun time. This was also back when I was getting into reading, but I haven't continued with the series, and I did have, I think, some issues with the way that the last book ended, or maybe I just didn't like the way it ended. Not issues, you know, that's a dramatic term, but I'm not going to continue. This book's been on my shelves forever. Why? Very quickly, I have 4 middle grade that I'm taking off my shelves. One of them is actually a series. I've got the trilogy For a Tale, Dark and Grim, which also is on Netflix. And I did have a lot of fun, but I just don't think I'm going to reread it. And it also reads a bit young for me when it comes to middle grade. So while it was really cute, and while I'm really glad I read the entire series, I just don't think I'm going to continue it. Also, The Ghost of Blackwood Hall. I know I'm a big mystery reader, but when it comes to Nancy Drew, this was my first and only experience, and I got it also in like a gift box, and it wasn't that impressive. I can see why we appreciate it for how it has supported the middle grade mystery like section within middle grade as a category, but like there are so many better modern authors in my opinion that also don't have as much problematic content, i.e. fat phobia. So yeah, there's no point in me keeping it on my shelves. From middle grade to YA, I have another book on here that was 100% on my shelf destruct list. Oh well, it is what it is. The Cruel Prince. I know a lot of people in that video had said, oh Leandra, I really like that series. I can't wait for you to read it. Oh, please don't make it shelf destruct. Please don't unhaul it. I'm disappointing you all because I'm unhauling it. There's no way I'm gonna read it. I've also heard that it's a bully romance, and that has not gone well with me in the past. So I don't know. There's too many things against it. Also, The Host. Oh my gosh, you're all wondering why have I kept this on my shelf. I don't know. I just really liked it. I remember it was one of my first experiences of ever rereading, which is very funny. And for some reason, I was really obsessed with the movie, which everyone unanimously agrees was terrible. I can't explain it, but I'm finally over it, and so I'm gonna, unhaul it. Also, The Prey. I picked this up on some random book haul extravaganza. I have no idea why I picked it up. I don't even know what it's about. I'm assuming it's dystopian. It talks about a republic of the true America. No, thank you. I'm good. I literally do not need that in my life right now. I don't. And then we also have The Urban Boys. This was also sent to me for promotional material from the publisher or from the author, I think, because I do think it's independently published, but it's not for me. I don't know. Like, especially being like YA urban fantasy, I just know that it's not going to be a book that interests me, and I'm pretty sure I started it and I DNF'd it. I have all of these classics. A lot of you are not going to be happy with me. There are a lot of books on my hands right now that I can already see you all like shaking your heads, but it is what it is. I'm unhauling Jane Austen, Pride and Prejudice. I don't know. I wasn't that impressed with it. I'm keeping Sense and Sensibility on my have-read shelves, but I've already gotten rid of Emma, and I wasn't that impressed with this. Everyone adores it. I think it's because of the movie, to be honest. And yeah, I'm keeping Sense and Sensibility because at the moment that's my favorite Jane Austen. I've got a couple more I gotta read. Mansfield Park and Northanger Abbey. Also Persuasion. But yeah, I don't really see the hype, and I've read this twice. Oliver Twist. I read this back actually with the Amazing Readathon back in August, and I gave it 2 stars. I wasn't that impressed. One, it is a mystery, which actually was quite surprising. A classic mystery, even though it kind of leans more classic than mystery, but there is a mystery at hand. Who is Oliver Twist, and what are all these strange things happening to him? But it was way too long. It did not need to be this long, and also the depictions of like Jewish people. No thanks, I'm good. So I'm unhauling this very pretty edition, but again, maybe off to someone else who will appreciate it more than me. Speaking of pretty editions, The Odyssey by Homer. I got this back when I actually was a part of the Coffee and a Classic subscription. I like the idea of it. I thought it was going to convince me to read classics, and I have read this back in school. I think I read this either in middle school or like 9th grade. And why would I read it again? I don't know. I appreciated it. I love the various references that we still use today in literature, in pop culture references based off of the Odyssey and a lot of these classics, but it's not my vibe. And that also goes with William Shakespeare's tragedies. I don't care about William Shakespeare. I took a Shakespeare course in my master's. We focused on the comedies and the histories, which was very interesting because neither of those were covered back during my secondary education. We mainly focused on the romances and the tragedies, and this is all of the tragedies. If I had to choose, there are a couple comedy plays that I really appreciated and thought were really fascinating for discourse, for like a modern discussion on the treatment of women, on societal norms. But to be completely honest, beyond that, I don't know. He's not for me. I don't know why we still care about him. I'm also going to be unhauling 2 F. Scott Fitzgerald's books. And to be honest, I think I own The Great Gatsby somewhere, and if I could find it, I would unhaul that too. But I'm unhauling Babylon Revisited, as well as The Beautiful and the Damned. I don't know. I find his work kind of boring. Again, a lot of people really appreciate him, but it's not for me. Next, I'm unhauling Oliver Goldsmith, She Stoops to Conquer. Now, I kept this for a long time because I took this class on plays, absurdist plays, back in the day, and it was really fun, but I already kind of have the plays that I want to keep that I really loved, and one day maybe I'll want to unhaul them, but this one wasn't that special to me, so I'm okay with getting rid of it. Also, Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I'm sorry, friends. I've read this a handful of times. I've read this twice in school, and so I'm very familiar with the material. I appreciate Mary Shelley as a person, what she has done for the world, but I just don't really care about the story of Frankenstein. I feel like I would be more interested in reading the retellings or reimaginings that are out there nowadays than actually reading the original material, because I've already done that. I've done it too many times at this point, so I don't need to. The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. I just don't care. I don't care. I've never read anything by Mark Twain. I don't think. No, I've never read anything by Mark Twain. And maybe one day, and if I do, the library will have it. I'll probably do it as an audiobook because that's typically how I handle classics these days. And finally, we have Anna Karenina Tolstoy. It's a chunky book. It's a classic. Also, from what I've heard about it, I'm not into it. I don't really want to read it, so away it goes. And now, so many like general fiction, historical fiction, literary fiction, that this is just going to be a rapid fire, and I'll tell you if I've read it or if I haven't. Infinite Country, I did really like this. I think it made me cry, but I just don't think I'm ever going to read it again, and it did just get like 4 stars. It might have gotten 5, but at this point, I don't think it's a 5 for me now, so I'll give it away. Loud cars. Why do they exist? The Girl with the Louding Voice. I know that it's well loved and it's really impactful, but I just don't think it's for me, and I'd rather like not try and then DNF it or read it and give it a poor rating. Amy Tan's The Joy Luck Club. I loved this. I gave it 5 stars. I actually buddy read this with 2 friends, and all 3 of us found it really interesting, but I don't think I'm gonna reread it. So I might as well let someone else have the chance. Another book on my shelf-destruct list. I'm so sorry, Taya Obret. I mean, I really liked Your Tiger's Wife, and also I'm pretty sure I have that in my unhaul too, but I don't think I'm a literary fiction person anymore, and so I need to be honest with myself. A lot of the books that I used to collect, mainly because I got my bachelor's in creative writing, made me lean towards literary fic, and it's not the genres that I read anymore. Forever by Pete Hamill. I think this is actually more like magical realism historical fiction. Like I think there's some fantasy vibes in it, and it's really loved as well, but I don't want to read it. The God of Small Things. Also haven't read it, and I'm never gonna want to. I've also not heard great things about it. Some people have really hated it. The Enchanted. I bought this for an author event years ago. Did not attend author event, did not read this book, and I probably won't. Vampires in the Lemon Grove. I really do love Karen Russell. She attended an event at my college and I fell in love with her. I read everything by her, and I haven't done that in years. And now again, short stories, I'm not gonna reread them. So sorry, Karen, but they gotta go. Another Mitch Albom, The 5 People You'll Meet in Heaven or something like that. Yeah, I'm just not going to reread it, and I don't really have an interest in reading anymore by him, fictional or non-fictional. Pigs in Heaven by Barbara Kingsolver. This is the second book to The Bean Trees. I read The Bean Trees with a friend. I thought it was okay. I just don't want to continue. I am keeping my edition of Poisonwood Bible though, because that book was amazing. Solar Storms. This is eco-fiction, so really impactful by an Indigenous author, but I read it for a class and I just can't see myself rereading it. Einstein's Dreams. Friend's mother gave this to me. I did find it really thoughtful. It was really quick, and I loved the absurdist view on like various dreams and worlds inspired by Einstein's theories, but I'm not gonna read it again. All the World's a Grave. This is like a reanimated version of a Shakespearean play with all of Shakespeare's main characters, and I DNF'd it because, like I said, I don't care about William Shakespeare, whether it's written by Shakespeare or someone else. The Traveling Cat Chronicles. I feel so badly. This is probably gonna be a really impactful book, but I also don't want to cry because I know what it's about, and it's just, that's not something I want in my life right now, and so I can't have it on my shelves. We the Animals. I don't remember why I bought this, but I don't have an interest in reading it. This was definitely a random haul, also very literary, and just not for me. A Girl Goes Into the Forest. This one was a really lovely short story collection. I remember I really appreciated it. There are so many lines that I actually underlined in here, but I'm not gonna reread it. So it's a really pretty cover, but if I'm not gonna reread it, why do I have it? Bibliophile. I literally picked this up in the secondhand section of my Barnes & Noble back when I was living in upstate New York, because that Barnes & Noble had one. It was only a couple dollars. I like the idea of it being set at this, like, you know, library or bookstore, having something bookish related to the plot. And then I discovered that I'm pretty sure it's like novellas, or there's a novella and like some short stories. No, I don't want to read it, so I'm giving it away. I promise we're almost at the end. I did tell you Taya Obert would be on here, and The Tiger's Wife, I gave it 5 stars when I read it, and then I made it a host favorite for Battle of the Girl Bands, and I remembered that I probably shouldn't have done that, because as impactful as it was, as much as I loved it when I read it, I'm a different reader, and I think a lot of people were surprised when I made it a host favorite, because it doesn't sound like me, and I agree with them, and I'm not going to reread it. Stories of Your Life and Others, again, short stories. I'm never going to get to this. The 100 Brothers. I was recommended this because I really like surrealist fiction, like absurdist stuff, but it was a bit too much for me, and so I thought it was fine. I gave it 3 stars. I'm not going to read it again. Wait Till You See Me Dance. This is another short story collection. I loved it when I read it, but I will not be rereading it, so I might as well give it away. I already mentioned this, The Bean Trees. This is the first book to Pigs in Heaven by Barbara Kingsolver. I gave this 3 stars, so I'm not going to continue, and that also means I'm not going to reread this. An Arsonist's Guide to Writers' Homes in New England. I bought this for $1 at the secondhand section in my old Barnes & Noble, and I'm not going to read it. It has so many negative ratings that I'm numb. It's not going to be for me. Water for Elephants. I was definitely influenced by the fact that the movie was coming out with like Reese Witherspoon. I also never watched that movie, funnily enough. And I also didn't read this book. I'm not going to. Historical fiction. It's not for me. I really love historical mysteries. I like alternate history, historical fantasy, but straight up historical fiction, I am not going to touch it. The Final Stick. We're getting through it. We can do it. A Little More Human. I also bought this secondhand, and I thought it sounded interesting, but I also just know I'm not going to get to it. I'm not going to read it. All the Names They Used for God. This is also a very literary short story collection. I actually remember buying it in a secondhand bookstore when I was visiting Ithaca once. And that's all I remember about it, and I think that's why I wanted to buy it. To be like, oh, I bought a book here. Why? I'm getting rid of it. Heirlooms by Rachel Hall. This is actually an author who used to be one of my professors. I read it and I remember really enjoying it, but it's also just straight up historical fiction. It's a collection of short stories set in World War II. So it's not gonna be something I'm gonna keep reading. And I also am not a huge fan of Europe setting World War II. I think it's really oversaturated and it's just not something I really go for anymore. Kind of speaking of, but I believe this is World War I. We have Not All Bastards Are From Vienna. This is a translation, which really intrigued me, but I think it's just straight up historical fiction, and I'm not gonna read it. Hotel World by Ellie Smith. I remember everyone was freaking out. I think it was about her book called Autumn, or Spring, one of those, and it was really relatable during the time of like Brexit, the original transition, and so I really wanted to try her, and so I just started buying her books, and I don't think I'm gonna read this. The Star-Crossed Sisters of Tuscany. You see a trend here. I am getting rid of some of my old Book of the Month books, whether I've read them or not, and I haven't read this, but I know I'm not going to. I also think this might have been on my shelf destruct list, but it also might not have been. I'm also getting rid of The Far Field, also from my Book of the Month days. These 2 books, I'm not interested. I feel badly. I'm sure that they're really good for the right reader, but when it comes to general fiction or historical fiction, for the most part, unless you're an author that has really solidified yourself in my mind already, I can't trust it, and I don't want to give a poor rating to a book when I know it's not for me. I also just don't want to keep giving 3-star ratings. because that's typically what I do when I know it's a me thing, than the book. And finally, very clearly a book I got secondhand because I don't even have the dust jacket. It's called The Sleepwalker's Guide to Dancing. It's very thick, and I'm pretty sure it's very literary. It's by some professor. That's why I bought it, because I was like, ah, that's a professor at X university. I should try this. And I haven't picked it up. I'm not really that interested. So yeah, it does have kind of a map. It might be good for some people, but I might as well just, yeah, probably put it on my free shelf at the library. All right, I did all of that while sprinting on the side, so I'm pretty proud of myself. Thank you all so much for getting to the end of this video. I really do appreciate it, and I appreciate my patrons over at the Manor. I know there have been a few people who have joined recently, and in the next video, I'll make sure to do a very special shout out to each of you because I do appreciate you so much. So if you see your name on the screen as I highlight our lovely sleuths, our lovely witnesses, my very suspicious suspects, and my very sad and dead corpses, just know that I will be highlighting you next video because you're new and we need to welcome you appropriately. It's just that this was a very impromptu video and I completely forgot to do that at the beginning with my intro. Thank you all so much. I do hope to see you all in the next one, and to do that you might want to subscribe if you had fun. You also might want to like the video, and also feel free to comment maybe your surprise, your shock, your anger at any of the books that I'm unhauling. I am very sorry about that, but at this point, what's done is done, and I feel very good about it. I'm feeling very relieved that this process is over and that I have gotten these books off my shelves. So I'm sorry if any of them are your favorites, but I promise you the intention is for them to go to better homes that will appreciate them in a way that I can't. All right, happy reading everyone. If you are in the Amazing Readathon, I really do hope that you're having some 5-star reads, that you're not feeling too anxious, that you're drinking water, that you're sleeping well at night, that you're eating, and that you are enjoying just the bookish experience of reading fun books with friends on the internet. All right, see you guys next time.